class of 2005. Woo! It is my dream. It's my dream to be the first locally owned, minority woman-led cannabis dispensary here in Parsippany. And I wanted the opportunity to connect with fellow residents and business owners here to discuss what it would be like to have Happy Daze Boutique operate in town. So tonight we'll be going over some key points in cannabis education, regulations, safety, as well as the socioeconomic impact of having a state-licensed dispensary operate in town. We will also open the floor up for your questions and comments and give an opportunity to those who want to share their personal stories around cannabis. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that this is a safe space. Our goal here tonight is to provide education on a topic that most people are not familiar with, and to provide a respectful environment where you can share your thoughts. Because as is true with most issues, divisiveness usually comes from a lack of education from all perspectives. Whether it's your neighbors, your family, your friends, or all three, there is a great chance that you know someone that consumes cannabis and benefits from the plant. When I named this event, Building Community and Destigmatizing Cannabis, it's not only to reflect on my personal history with cannabis, but to also highlight the stories of other people as well. So from my own personal experience, it is my belief that cannabis is best used with a specific therapeutic intention in mind. Whether you're choosing cannabis to treat chronic pain, use it socially, or because you just want to unwind at the end of a very long day, its application is far-reaching. When pharmaceutical interventions fail, or you're simply looking for an alternative, it's important to do your own research before drawing conclusions, because cannabis has been unfairly portrayed and misrepresented for far too long. As such, I think it's important that you hear my story and why I'm so passionate about bringing Happy Daze Boutique to my hometown here in Parsippany, New Jersey. My personal cannabis journey began in 2020 when I made the decision to become a medical cannabis patient to treat my anxiety and insomnia. My doctor at the time had prescribed me Xanax, and I took it for a very short time. I didn't like how it made me feel, and it had way too many side effects for me to be comfortable taking it. The medication actually started to negatively impact my day-to-day ability to function, so I looked into other options. As a massage therapist, focused on holistic healing treatments, I wanted to find alternatives for myself. So I researched a ton about cannabis and saw that it was being used to treat a number of medical conditions, including anxiety, depression, PTSD, seizures, opioid addiction, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, migraines, and Tourette syndrome, just to name a few. At first, I was embarrassed and reluctant about my cannabis use. Thankfully, I was able to schedule a telemedicine appointment because the idea of going into a doctor's office to get a prescription overwhelmed me. But the decision to become a medical cannabis patient was life-changing for me, and I'm not exaggerating. I value my health. I spend a lot of time and effort doing the right things to keep myself healthy, like eating right and exercising. So I felt helpless and started losing hope when the medication that was supposed to help me with my anxiety started making me feel worse. I honestly didn't even want to exercise or go for walks. I really became numb to the world. When I began consuming cannabis as a medical patient, my insomnia and anxiety quickly resolved. I started feeling better than I thought was possible. My mind was clear and focused. And since that time, I've been able to channel my energy into opening my own massage therapy practice and focusing on getting Happy Daze Boutique up and running for these past 18 months. During this time, my thoughts about cannabis and its use completely changed. And here are some important things that I learned that helped change my perspective. First and foremost, it's important to know that cannabis prohibition is rooted in racism. Beginning in 1910, after the Mexican Revolution, there was a huge influx of Mexican immigrants looking for work in the United States. They typically used cannabis as medicine or to relax. And although cannabis already existed in the United States, the term marijuana became associated with these immigrants, and the fear and the prejudices about the Spanish-speaking newcomers grew. Second, between 1850 and 1937, cannabis was actually recognized and used for its medical benefits in the United States. In fact, several large pharmaceutical companies offered tinctures or drops for medical use. But, despite all of that, the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 was created by campaigners that warned people of the so-called marijuana menace, which attributed crimes to marijuana and the Mexicans who used it, which began the criminalization and true stigmatization of cannabis. In 1970, Congress passed the Controlled Substances Act, and 5 schedules were created. Cannabis was placed in the list of Schedule I drugs along with heroin and LSD. According to this classification, cannabis is considered to have no currently accepted medical use. However, despite being classified as a Schedule I drug, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services filed a patent in 1998 that was approved in 2003 for cannabis as an antioxidant and neuroprotectant. The U.S. patent number is 6630507, and you can actually look up the patent yourself. That patent states that cannabis is useful in the treatment of age-related, inflammatory, and autoimmune diseases. Its particular application is helpful in treating neurological damage from stroke, trauma, or in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and HIV dementia. So it's no wonder that advocates of the cannabis plant have been fighting for its rightful legalization, and that we're seeing the results of this locally in New Jersey and across our entire country these past few years. As of this month, there are now 42 dispensaries serving all of New Jersey's medical patients and adult use consumers. This is 36 more than the original 6 alternate treatment centers that were established solely for the medical use program. The first one opened in 2012. So there's a clear progression to make cannabis more accessible, not only for both medical and adult use consumers, but even amongst elite athletes. In recent news, as of April 2023, the NBA will remove cannabis from drug testing panels and will no longer penalize cannabis use amongst its players. Former NBA player Al Harrington has stated that approximately 85% of players consume some form of cannabis. So, as I said at the beginning, our goal tonight is to provide education on cannabis, a topic that most people, even experienced consumers, are not necessarily familiar with, and to provide a respectful environment where you can share your thoughts. So with that in mind, I'd now like to move into having Happy Daze Boutique's co-owner and my husband, Dr. Shaun Astorga, kick us off with some insight into our company and its plans for Parsippany.
Was the applause for me or for?
It's for her. Here's for you.
So good evening. As my wife said, my name is Dr. Shaun Astorga. I'm the CFO and co-owner of Happy Daze Boutique. I have been a Parsippany resident for over 20 years. I'm a graduate of the Parsippany school system, having attended Brooklawn Middle School and Parsippany Hills High School, class of 2002. My parents and sister live in Parsippany, and we live in my wife's childhood home in Parsippany. I share this because our mission with Happy Daze Boutique is very personal for us. I'm also a healthcare professional and a healthcare business owner, so I take the topic of public health and safety very seriously. And it is my belief that all business owners have a level of social responsibility. I view Happy Daze Boutique as the vehicle that, combined with our background in healthcare, will allow us the unique opportunity to help elevate the community that we call home. I think it is also important to understand my perspective on cannabis because up until recently, I was someone who was actually opposed to it. I never consumed it in high school, in college, or in the many years that followed because I used to think very negatively about it. And I didn't obviously want to get in any legal trouble. In 2017, I suffered a brain injury that did not typically recover. For a few years following that injury, I went to a number of specialists who would not believe that I'm standing here talking to you all in this capacity. And up until 2022, I still had some neurological and cognitive issues, like difficulty finding words when I would speak, issues with short-term memory, and physical pain in the form of headaches that occurred daily. I had tried everything I could from a medical standpoint up to that point. In April of 2022, adult use cannabis became available for purchase, and I started thinking about the people who I know that consume the plant and how it's impacted them. My wife already told you her story. It was transformative for her, and it literally changed the trajectory of her life. My sister, she has multiple sclerosis, which is a neurological condition. In her early 20s, she had to use a cane due to balance issues. Her speech would slur, and she dealt with neurological pain in the form of shocks that would shoot down her arms. This is in her 20s. She began consuming cannabis as a medical patient, and after a period of time, no longer has this pain. She's able to run and exercise without a cane, and she no longer slurs her speech. It is hard to deny the benefits of the plant when you see these things firsthand, but I'm a medical professional, and I always have to rely on science, so I did a lot of research. Did you know that inside of every single person in this room, inside of you, inside of me, is something called the endocannabinoid system? I didn't know this either, but now I do, and here's why it is relevant for you all to know as well. This system regulates and controls many of our critical bodily functions, such as learning and memory, emotional processing, sleep, temperature control, pain control, inflammatory and immune responses, and eating. Cannabinoids, they're the compound that make up the cannabis plant. These compounds from the plant bind with these receptors that are inside of your body, and you get the therapeutic effect. This is why the benefits of cannabis exist and why they're so widespread. Logical thing. I tried some for the first time last year, and I had the same experience as my wife and my sister. And you see me here in front of you. I don't have issues with having coherent thoughts, except for that one right there. No issues with finding words. That was more nerves. And you have to take my word for it, but I don't suffer from daily headaches anymore. But before I go on, I do want to issue a word of caution. I don't want these stories to be taken as me saying that I think every single person in the world would benefit from cannabis, because that's simply not true. I share these stories because there may be people in this room who are skeptical, like I was, who only think of the negative associations that you commonly hear critics discuss. And I want to make sure that you have a fuller picture so that you can form your own opinion. The decision for me to help my wife bring Happy Daze Boutique to life was very simple. Our company is founded on what we call Happy Daze Boutique's community care program, which consists of 5 pillars where we will focus resources in the form of volunteerism and charitable donations that align with our company's values. A portion of every single sale will go directly to this. The 5 pillars are helping the homeless and impoverished, relieving hunger, ensuring public health and safety, providing social equity opportunities, and supporting environmental sustainability. The primary emphasis for our public health and safety initiatives revolves around youth education and mentoring programs, and programs helping to support those who are experiencing substance abuse get their lives back. We've already started working on this initiative, even though we're not operating yet by joining Kiwanis Club of Greater Parsippany, and we're in the process of identifying and joining other like-minded organizations. So if anyone here tonight has any recommendations, please let us know. Thank you again for your time tonight, and I'm going to turn things back over to my wife, Cassara, so that she can introduce our panel of people who have helped us tremendously over this journey. I'll also be around after they speak so that we can open the floor to any comments and questions that you may have. And I'll be hanging around after the event, so if anyone has any questions, I'd love the opportunity to meet you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'll just have everyone introduce themselves individually, just describe what you do, how you got involved into the cannabis industry, and what led you there. Start with you, Ron?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not going to spend too much time because I have several slides that introduce me. So, but my name is Ron Mondello, and I typically represent municipalities in the cannabis space. So the presentation that we're going to go through, I'm neither for nor against cannabis. I don't live here. I don't govern here. So that's a decision for your elected officials, and it's not for me.
Todd? Do you want us to use microphones, by the way? Do you need us to use microphones? Only because you're recording this, right? Do you know how to turn your microphone on? Okay, perfect. So, Todd Polinak, I actually also live in Parsippany. I vote in Parsippany. I play golf in Parsippany, and I'm a business owner in Parsippany. So this is my town. I am a CPA by trade. My expertise is in cannabis. Several clients in the cannabis industry. I'm also what would be considered an evangelist for cannabis. And I'll tell you the reason why I can really relate to you. I've gone all over the country speaking, and one of the things I've heard over and over again is from parents who've told me that either cannabis has saved their kids' lives or their lives. So I think that the stigma that we are going to talk about, I think in a minute, is something that we need to address. Your presuppositions affect the way that you see things, guys. And I think when you finally realize that there might be something more to the story than what you've been told through DARE, you might see things a little bit differently. So I'm very excited to be here in my own hometown to say, I think cannabis needs to be moved forward in Parsippany. So I'm taking a different position than you.
I don't take any position.
That's right, that's what I'm saying, because you're not, you don't live here.
Switzerland over here.
Your turn, my friend.
Thank you, thank you. Well, who came expecting a history lesson when you came to this meeting?
I did.
You did? I was impressed with that. I hadn't heard.
Short snippet.
We know stuff, we know stuff.
It was pretty awesome. So I am Happy Daze Boutique attorney. Very impressed with them. I got involved with cannabis, not by choice, but kind of by force. I was the general counsel for the Senate Majority Office back in 2016, 2017, those years. And Senator Scutari just simply walked in my office. We're talking about seating judges, we're talking about laws, whether they're constitutional, regular day, and he just says, I think we should legalize marijuana in New Jersey. Nah, that's not gonna happen. New Jersey's the only place in the country where you can't pump your own gas or buy a firecracker. So there is absolutely no way these people are gonna do it. We got things to do. You see this pile of stuff I'm working on. And he was like, no, I think we can do it. And then he says, Colorado has so much money from taxes, they don't know what to do with it. I said, we might be onto something. So we started working on it. Initially, the idea was to tax, regulate, and legalize. That's it. It was 50-page legislation, pretty thick for legislation, but not overly onerous. Then we started trying to get things moving. Started to gain some momentum. More hands started getting involved. Have a meeting. True story, the late, great Ron Rice, mentor of mine, good friend, Mr. Great, walks into the meeting and says, I'm not gonna go for it. Not surprised, but what's your problem? And he says, rich white people from out of state are gonna come in, they're gonna take all the money and leave, it's not gonna benefit us at all, so I'm done with it, no chance. So he was like, that sounds pretty bad. So me, myself, and the other staffers went to work on that, like how are we gonna attack all these different things? So we started with the rich thing. So we're gonna create licenses for people that aren't multimillionaires. So that's why you have conditional licensure. And then we're gonna make some set-asides for minorities and women to make sure it's not all white guys. And we're gonna have certain types of licenses for micro licenses for local folks so that everybody's not from out of state. So we go back and like, all right, we rich white guy from out of state thing solves your problem. Senator Rice, you're all right with that? And he says, what about social justice? What does that even mean, bro? You're killing me. And he says, very succinctly, he said, it doesn't sound fair for some people to make millions upon millions of dollars doing something. Other people having done the same thing, rotting in jail. That's not right. Okay, expungements for everybody. So then we started down that road, expungements, and then things went well, and eventually we got it done. I'm very proud of how far it's come. I'm actually impressed with the regulators that came afterwards that took that social equity thing a step further. We had never contemplated when it was in the Senate that you would get an extra bump if you had it. The idea was like to take that away as an obstacle, but they took the extra step. So if you've been arrested, that you get the extra bump. I think that's a great idea. I think it's working. I think it's going to be a very diverse industry as it was set out to be. So now that I do private companies, I represent a lot of companies that are getting marijuana licenses. What I've found is that there are two types of companies. The one group is the successful businessman in some other thing, right? He has a bunch of funeral parlors, he has a bunch of hotels, he's a successful businessman, he's like, oh, this is the next great thing, so I'm gonna come do marijuana. The other group are people that just love the plant. And they just
Like pizza.
right? So they're like, this is my, never did a business plan before, never got investors before, never hired a lawyer that's gonna cost as much as it's gonna cost to hire me, right? But they just love the plant, so they wanna get into the business. What I love about this group is they're actually both of those things. They're one of the few companies that are both successful business people in other areas and passionate about marijuana. So I think if anyone can win, it's this group.
I'm voting for them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So that's all right now.
gonna stand here, and I don't need the microphone, I'm Italian, so you can probably hear me from the back here. Besides, I feel like I'm looking at an eclipse with those two lights.
We're on Broadway.
So I'm hoping that
Do you
Todd
want us
Father,
to sit up front there? Yeah. we'll do
yeah,
it.
I'm hoping that Todd Father and Fru Kwan will actually chime in on
I'll stay.
these slides here as we go through them. This is really designed for a governing body, but you'll at least see the education that I try to bring to the several municipalities that I represent. So just very quickly, I did say some things about myself, but I am a trustee of the New Jersey Institute of Local Government Attorneys, the New Jersey State Bar Association, the Cannabis Law Committee, the Cannabis Municipal Land Use, and as I mentioned, the trustee of that organization. I do a lot of seminars for the New Jersey State League of Municipalities. That is my website. It's got a ton of frequently asked questions and videos on it. Welcome to check it out. My business card looks exactly like that. People are often scratching this, seeing if it smells like it.
That's a good idea, actually.
You
I'm
know,
gonna steal that one.
it's not a scratch and sniff card. I represent Jersey City, Hoboken, Atlantic City, Oakland, Maywood, Asbury Park, Hightstown, Carlstadt, Rochelle Park, Reddington, New Brunswick, and now the town of Harrison. So I was a councilman at two towns, borough attorney, zoning and planning board chairman and member. It's a very good fit, having done land use and representing governing bodies for all these 30 years plus. This line of work for me, representing municipalities, is a good fit. Now, my son says it's really important that you know my favorite band, so we got the Allman Brothers here and the Grateful Dead off to the right, and it's in that order. Yep, I know, Todd, this is just you, but this is both of them.
No, I like the Allman Brothers.
So this is America's.
Joe Walsh too.
This is America's views. And again, if anybody has any questions, I think this is a pretty informal audience. Just blurt it out, if that's all right with you, Sarah.
Yeah, I'll just bring you a mic if you have a question.
These are the Americans' views on legalizing marijuana, and I suspect in the next couple of years it certainly will hover somewhere around here. It'll never be here, but somewhere around there. All right, so the Cannabis Regulatory Commission that Fru Kwan helped to create through legislation, these are the folks that dole out the licenses, and without their support, without their thumbs up, you would never be able to get a license from the state of New Jersey. And I've had the pleasure of doing several seminars with Diana. Charles is my favorite because he votes no on everything.
Yeah, he does.
No.
Is he like the
Well,
contrary vote
what-
on it?
Yeah, much like the New Jersey weed man who filed a lawsuit in federal district court trying to eviscerate CREMA. And New Jersey weed man coined the phrase the Caucasian cannabis cartel. And I think what the New Jersey weed man was saying, as Fru Kwan said, that this is just going to be rich white guys making a lot of money, and he believes that there's not enough licenses being given to other folks. All right. I'm guessing, I'm hoping that Fru Kwan agrees with me, but you know, there are 564 municipalities. California has, in New Jersey, California has 482. The only way, in my opinion, we got this legislation passed, other than appeasing Senator Ron Rice, who was a police officer, right?
Yes.
Is home rule. Towns have complete control over this process. Even if the CRC was inclined to give you or your client, a friend, a relative, a license for cannabis, if you don't get it from your governing body, a resolution of support, you absolutely have no gas in the engine. You're not going anywhere. Many towns opted out. What does that mean? One of the organizations that I belong to, the New Jersey Institute of Local Government Attorneys, I mean, I'm old, but those guys are 20 years older than me. They recommended to all the municipalities to opt out. We don't know what the regulations are, so opt out. You know, basically do not allow cannabis to come into your town. And there was a deadline in the statute. You had to opt out by a certain period of time. Otherwise, the state's rules automatically trounced your town and said, well, you can put retail in your commercial district. You can put distribution and wholesale and cultivation in your industrial. So most of the towns opted out. Now, most of the towns are starting to opt in. And we'll see why. Cannabis is not right for every town. And some of the guiding posts are, if you're a bedroom community, you have no vacancies, and you're flush with cash. As a councilman in 2 other towns, why would I ever want to bring that into my town? There's no vacancies, it's a bedroom community, we're flush with cash. On the other hand, and I don't want to speak for, I don't know everything about Parsippany, but I certainly know they're not a bedroom community. I did look at their budget, they're not flush with cash, so they may want to consider expanding what they have done thus far. Maybe not, but those are some of the guiding posts, or at least the stop signs.
Can I make a comment
Sure.
about that?
Yeah, please.
So he's absolutely right. Towns opted out initially. A lot of towns opted out initially. The only people that suffered from that are the local entrepreneurs that wanted to operate. Like I mentioned earlier, micro licenses, those are designed for people to open up businesses in their hometown or a town that's adjacent. But if you live in a hometown that has opted out and all the towns around you have opted out, that means that you can't get in the business, at least as a micro license. And what I found, and that has been the only victims of the opt-out. It's not like the industry can't support itself with the towns that have opted in. The bigger towns have opted in, they'll have plenty, there'll be enough, for everyone to open a business. The only penalty I have found was for local entrepreneurs. Some of them have just been cut out of the business altogether, which is a shame.
So as a Parsippany resident, can I say something? Because I know I have Parsippany representation here. So we're going to come up for a time where we're voting for things, right? And for some reason, we always talk about increasing our taxes. Rochelle Park, I'm not going to say who, because we know who, but it's a very large multi-state operator.
Ascend.
Thank you. You can, as a municipality, you can charge up to 2% of the receipts. And I believe, based upon what they reported, I did the calculation roughly, I think they're getting paid $400,000 a quarter, based upon the numbers that I calculated. So as a resident of Parsippany, as a voter in Parsippany, and anyone else here who's a Parsippany resident, why would you want to turn down that type of tax revenue? We keep on talking about we want to cut. Every politician I've ever met in my life tells me they're going to cut my taxes. Every one of them. Democrats, Republicans. The Libertarians not so much, because they want to get rid of government altogether, which I actually agree with. But they all say they're going to cut taxes, and they never do. Why? Because they really can't. Why? They can't. Because you've got to meet your budgets. But if you have a revenue source, 2% of your receipts, Ron, 2%. Doesn't that make sense to you?
Yeah, it'll move the municipal budget, but let's be honest, in New Jersey, most of our taxes are from school. Where I live, it's 86%, my tax bill. So until there's a constitutional convention to change the way we fund schooling, but it certainly will move the municipal budget needle. All right. So municipalities, they have complete control. This looks like a very long slide. I think the only thing we take out of this is that a municipality can ban cannabis smoking, just like they ban tobacco smoking via the New Jersey Smoke-Free Air Act. So you don't have to worry about people smoking cannabis in your parks if you're not allowed to smoke a cigarette or a pipe or even chew tobacco in some instances. I've seen those in their ordinances. So these are some of the folks that should be involved if the town decides that they want to opt in, certainly council members. And again, some of these slides you may not be able to relate to unless you're a municipal official. But they set the 10,000-foot view policies, licensing caps, distancing, community impacts, and then you always want to have your construction and planning and zoning officials involved. Also, community stakeholders, why not? Local businesses, like the one we just heard from. Schools, universities, law enforcement, other citizens, and then, of course, your law department. We're not going over that, that's for sure. This is a cannabis ordinance checklist that I specifically put together for municipalities when they start to think about cannabis, these are the things that they should be thinking about. And some of the topics here are what classes of licenses, are you gonna have micro businesses? Almost no municipality knows about testing labs, and that's my soapbox. I don't understand, I know why they don't understand, they don't know about it, but when they do find out about it, they don't want it. Why? No 2%. You get no revenue from the testing facility.
That, by the way, can you work on that?
But you know, cannabis is here, and our friends, relatives, our kids that are over 21, they're using cannabis. We want to make sure there's no metals, certainly no fentanyl. We want to make sure we know what the THC level is. So it's here. Let's test it. And there is not a plethora of testing labs. There is a deficiency of testing labs. So hopefully more and more towns will allow them. All right, not going to bother with this. This is just the checklist again. Some of the things that municipal officials, should be looking at. Signage. Interesting thing. The state actually indicates that all of the windows of a cannabis retail dispensary must be opaque. We don't want little kids looking in and seeing what's going on. We don't want anybody looking in. So they have to be opaque. There can't be a marijuana leaf on the building. You can't even reference the words cannabis, marijuana, et cetera, et cetera. So it's neutral. All right, so let's get into the classes, and I hope you guys will chime in on this. Class 1 is a cultivator, 2 is a manufacturer, 3 is a wholesaler. I still don't know what a distributor is, but you're going to fill me in on that when we get to it. Cannabis retailer, and then cannabis delivery service. This one is very interesting, and listen, the stigma is still out there. I had a mayor in Morris County, the town shall remain nameless. I don't like pot. I'm going to put a cop on the perimeter of my town to make sure it doesn't come into my town. I said, Mayor, you're going to lose the next election and you're probably going to be indicted. And what's even worse is the towns that have opted in around your town, they can deliver to your residents 24/7, and you can't do anything about it because the state has preempted that. So let's rock and roll. So we know what a cannabis grower is. They grow the actual leaf. Right? They cannot sell to consumers. Just some more information there. That's what one of the places looks like. That looks like an outdoor grow, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know.
It's like a greenhouse.
Greenhouse?
Looks like an outdoor greenhouse.
Pretty decent leaves there. So manufacturers, they essentially take the raw plant and use these fancy equipment to turn it into what? Gummies, tinctures, oils,
Lotions, all kinds of stuff.
all kinds of stuff. And
Can make it into shatter too.
And I've told this machinery is pretty expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Expensive.
North of $500,000 easy.
It's very expensive.
Yeah. So the wholesaler, I'm guessing that these guys own retail dispensaries, and they're going to be ordering 1,000 of these, 500 of these, whatever the case may be. So that would be a wholesaler. All right, here we go. Distributor transports cannabis items in bulk, intrastate, from one licensed cannabis establishment to another, and they can engage in temporary storage. So,
Yeah, it's like a business-to-business delivery.
okay.
So it's the delivery service, but not to the end customer.
So who would they be delivering to? Not a cultivator.
They will be
obviously.
delivering from a cultivator to a manufacturer,
Or a manufacturer.
from a cultivator to a
Yeah,
retail.
they're
you know.
the shipping guys, they ship.
They can deliver to a retail.
They can deliver to a retail.
They can.
The manufacturers have to buy flower from cultivators, so they can do that.
Oh, thanks. All right, thanks for that. So I don't know if the trucks look like that.
I think the state wants them to be no markings.
Yeah, I think so too. Although, I like that though.
Yeah,
Can you change that?
That's pretty cool.
We're not going to get into this, but some council folks asked me what's the difference, and I needed this because I'm still confused as to what the difference is. So class 5, that's right, the most sexy class.
Mhm.
That's the retailers, and that's what these places look like. They look like Apple stores, not these vape shops. That's been
Nice
my
places.
experience. Beautiful, beautiful stores. Finding that some cannabis businesses are investing upwards of $1 million in their store. So there goes your ratables. It's the assessed value of some dump is now $1.2 million, whatever the case may be. So let's do some myth busters. And again, I'm neither for or against it because I don't live here. I would not ever presume to tell the governing body what to do, but these are certainly some myth busters. They're worried that, a guy like this is going to be, I got to get rid of that. I look like that guy.
Wait, we'll see. Your sneakers are better. He has better sneakers.
I really
break
I need to delete that one. But I guess they're worried, this guy will be dancing the way I dance at a dead show and whatever. That it's going to be a blight on the neighborhood, bad influence on children, queuing all hours, and it's going to look like this dump, weed world.
Which is in New York City. I passed it the other day.
Yeah. And just to point out, Ron, like the towns have control of how it looks.
Absolutely.
Like I've had clients where the town said specifically, we want a awning, we want it to look like this, and you have to go to planning, so they control exactly.
The towns have complete control, 110%. My experience is this is what these places look like. Opaque windows, opaque, I got that right? Opaque, sorry.
Opaque.
You cannot see inside. You say opaque, I said tomato. They're beautiful stores, and certainly a couple years from now, soccer moms with their kids are going to walk by and nobody's even going to notice them. They're not even going to pay any attention to them. So this is an interesting one. Cannabis delivery. You can, I guess, sort of like this would be Uber Eats, but with weed. Just basically delivering. I guess you would use some kind of third-party technology platform and say, I want this strain from that dispensary, this one from that dispensary. They pick them up and drop them off at your door.
And just as a backstory, these licenses came from Assemblyman Jamil Holly. He had the idea, because all the other types of licenses is very expensive. If you want to do a dispensary, you probably need $1 million, at least 600,000, 700,000. Cultivators, upwards 5 to 10 million. I have a $20 million client. Yeah. But he said he wanted to have a type of license that a kid right out of college can get and make a couple dollars doing it. So I had the idea to do a delivery license, because all you need is a car and you'll be able to make some money. So.
But if you think about the legacy market does that all the time.
Right.
That's what they're doing.
That's what they're doing.
And this is another cannabis business, no 2%, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, how are you going to take 2% off the $25 the kids make in delivering weed to 2 places or whatever it is?
That's the idea. But of course, big companies like, I want to have 30 cars. Do I have to have a store? Can I do? That always happens. But it was designed for smaller operators to be.
Very cool. Well, let's hope it doesn't look like this. Though Todd would love to drive that around Parsippany.
Yeah, really. I don't think so.
All right. So again, my soapbox. This is a testing lab. One of the more important, I think the most important, cannabis business, to make sure that there aren't any of those things in our cannabis and that our friends, children, etc., are not ingesting that stuff. I've also worked as a criminal defense attorney, and when some of my clients get busted for weed, the pot has to get tested at the state lab. It takes a year for them to test it. So I usually get it dismissed. I can convince the judge, I don't have a lab certificate yet. All right, I'm going to give him 1 more month. That's how backed up the labs are. And I can imagine once the cultivators get up and running, maybe not now, but in a year from now, who's going to test all this stuff?
Yeah.
So micro businesses, Foucault spoke about this, and this is to let the little guy into the business. No more than 10 employees. You can't have more than 2,500 square feet. If you're a cultivator, or no, this is a manufacturer, you can't process more than 1,000 cannabis plants each month. That seems to be a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. The cultivator can't acquire or process more than 1,000 pounds a month. That seems like a lot too. Although I do have a lot of deadhead friends that probably burn through that in a couple of months.
Be careful.
Careful. Right. So anyway, there's some restrictions, but this is the vehicle to let the smaller folks, guys and gals, get into the business. Not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there are, and you guys can help me out, but there are 2 types of licenses. One is called a conditional license, and there are monetary thresholds. If you're single and you make more than $200,000, you can't do this. If you're married and you make more than $400,000, you can't do this. But you can apply as a conditional license applicant, And you can also, at the same time, apply with the state. And once the state approves your conditional license, you have 120 days to get the all-important resolution of support from the governing body, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. And conditional licenses have to be converted to annual, but if you don't fit those qualifiers, those income thresholds, you can apply for an annual license at the state, but you must get the all-important resolution of support first before you actually file with the state. These are just some time frames that, quite frankly, we're not going to spend.
No one pays attention to it.
Everybody,
Yeah.
this is when you can't sleep, right? You know,
Right.
we'll get some folks back there, right? So this is one of the more important slides. It's really a two-tiered process. And again, this is the most important piece of the puzzle. The resolution of support, it comes from the governing body, the most important piece of the puzzle to get repetitive, and the CRC will not approve a state cannabis license without it. Hence, this is very time sensitive. Local licensing, most towns already have a scheme for local licensing, your dog license, maybe even an alcohol license, whatever the case may be. So most of them don't reinvent it. They use their current licensing process. It's not time sensitive and it's ministerial. If a applicant, like Sarah, has gone through conditional license, she's got a resolution of support, she's converted to an annual, and now she needs a local license, it really should be akin to almost a rubber stamp. You've gotten everything in place, you've got the permits, your building permits, give us 10,000 and here's your local license. I am finding some towns are really out of control with some of the licensing fees and annual fees, application fees. I think Patterson started like 60 grand, and they got beat up pretty hard.
What was Newark?
Oh, that was Newark, that's right.
Was
Bayonne was up there as well.
Yeah, they're all charging a lot of money.
Is there some legislation pending?
I think it's illegal. No one's gonna challenge it, but I think it's illegal. Like if you pass a law and you say, you can charge up to 2% of the revenue as your fee, how are you gonna put another 20,000? That's not above the 2%. I think if someone challenged it,
We'll see.
they have a good shot.
I bet you there's gonna be some lawsuits
Yeah, but no one wants to do that because you want the license. You don't want
after they don't get the license.
you know, make the town mad at you. But some of these towns are being very creative, not only with the fees, but then they want you to do a host agreement. They want you to pay extra for the cops. They want you to pay 1% to the boys club. It gets pretty bad.
So as a land use attorney, these application fees, these annual renewal fees should really be causally related, tied to the actual expenses in the municipality. And 20 grand ain't tied to some zoning official checking out your application and issuing a permit. There's really no reasonable relationship, no nexus to that dollar amount and the amount of money that the municipality is expending on employees working on your application. So I think some judge would easily say, what's going on here? All right. So municipalities can create their own licensing. We know that. What else here? So here are the New Jersey municipality cannabis statutes in a nutshell. Municipalities can enact ordinances not in conflict with CREMA, that's the state statute. They can govern the number of cannabis establishments, but as I scolded that mayor, not delivery to your town. That's hands off. Even if my town has opted out and wants to remain that way, geographically close towns can deliver to my town 24/7 and I can't stop them. They can govern the location, manner, times of operation. If your governing body doesn't want cannabis sold on Sunday, that's it. They're allowed to do that. That's their prerogative. They can establish civil penalties for violations of the ordinances, and they can impose a separate local licensing, as we mentioned before. So, as I mentioned before, the New Jersey Institute of Local Government Attorneys, who advised the New Jersey League of Municipalities, said, oh my God, we don't know what the regulations are, we know what the statutes are, but we don't know what the regulations are, so everybody opt out. Well, guess what? The regulations were almost the same as the statute, just a bit more detail. Nothing that was really earth-shattering. So towns can enact all kinds of ordinances, not in conflict. We just saw that. Towns can place numerical limits. Yeah, we can govern the location, including placing distance restrictions from schools, religious institutions, playgrounds. I have seen some towns really abuse this. I scratch my head. Why does a cannabis dispensary have to be 2,000 feet away from a school? I mean, I don't see it. I don't get it. We don't do that to liquor stores, but I guess it's still the stigma, and it is what it is. Maybe it's just optics. I don't know. Establish civil penalties, create and impose their own local licensing, and again, same thing, free to prohibit any class of cannabis license, but you can't prohibit cannabis from being delivered to your residence. So no epiphany here. All right, so when there are land use issues, you want to make it feasible. Butler, which is the town next to where I live, they said that cannabis businesses could not be within 2,500 feet, linear feet of each other, so that essentially limited it to one on Route 23 in Butler. And that is a town that is not a bedroom community. They have some serious financial problems. They could use the revenue, but I don't know. Anyway, micro businesses, number of licenses, et cetera. So we're not going to go. This is a process I put together for Hoboken. I can't even read that. Same thing that I put together for Jersey City. This was interesting. Hoboken did this. They were getting so many telephone calls. Is this property, in the green zone? Is it zoned properly for cannabis? Luckily they've got a very talented IT staff. They put this interactive map together. So you plug in 145 Main Street and it tells you whether or not it's zoned for cannabis. I'm not suggesting every municipality can afford to do something like that, but man, it certainly saved the clerk and some of the other staff countless hours of fielding hundreds of telephone calls. I can't read that, but these are just some best practices for municipalities to set up a web page. This is the most important bullet here. Cannabis applications are not operable. The Open Public Meetings Act, if I want to get all the resolutions that the governing body did in the last month, I just send in an Oprah, and within 7 days the municipal clerk has to respond. If folks send in cannabis applications, it's not operable. Your competition can't see your business plan and your financials, et cetera, et cetera. This is a state statute, and I do this presentation, and the municipal clerks are like, really? It's a very, very important bullet on this slide. What else do we have here? Oh, any state or local enforcement, they can request. All right, so those folks that are delivering cannabis to your residents or the ones that are driving through your town, a police officer can actually stop them and ask for the cannabis business identification card or a copy of the transport order or delivery request. This is very repetitive again, and you can't restrict the transportation. This one catches a lot of eyes and ears for me when I am presenting to municipalities that have a lot of farms. Alamucci, they are really hurting for money. And when I explain to them that in no case shall a cannabis cultivator operator be located on land that is valued, assessed, or taxed as an agriculture or horticulture pursuant to the Farmland Assessment Act. But I explained to them, as long as there isn't something called a deed in preservation or an easement in preservation with the state, the farmer just doesn't have to send in his tax exemption for that year, and he can grow cannabis. So they have a lot of corn fields that I believe may be
Turning green. Instead of yellow, they're turning green.
So what are some of the limitations? No, you can't be with a grocery store, deli, no indoor food markets, anything that, I don't understand this. I mean, you can't even sell water. You would think after, who's got cotton mouth. I don't know.
You should at least be able to sell Doritos.
Doritos, M&M's, peanuts.
M&M with peanuts. Come on.
Well, you know, the consumption lounges, they can't sell food, but you can deliver food there.
It's so weird.
If
You
there's a
need to change that.
pizzeria, you know,
change
they're
that.
gonna.
I don't know what the fear was. I understand with the alcohol, but I don't know.
Yeah, I get the
I don't want people
alcohol.
to hang out and eat. I don't know. Keep going, Ron. You're going.
All right, so
you're on a
proof
spree
of,
here.
again, repetitive, but the all-important resolution of support from the governing body. And what does it consist of? It's a determination that the town has authorized that class of license. So, in other words, if the town has not permitted class 5, you can't get a resolution of support for class 5. And also confirmation that if that town has put a numerical limit on it, i.e. 3, can't be resolution number 4. This one is very interesting. I get 2 calls a week from zoning officials. I'm not giving them this letter. They have to go to the planning board first. No, I have to call up the borough attorney so the borough attorney can sit the zoning official down and say, no, all this letter is that this particular location for this particular class is zoned appropriately. It's 2 lines, but I can't tell you how many calls I get about this. And it's part of the process. You cannot get a license from the state if you don't have that resolution of support and what they call a zoning letter. The CRC really messed it up. They call it zoning approval. No, there's no zoning approval. That would mean going to the zoning board. That would mean it's a prohibited use. It's not a prohibited use in that town. You wouldn't be asking for a license if it was. But that's the way the statute and the regulations read, that you need zoning approval. No. All right. So how does the town handle this stuff? The way they do with most applications. Odor, they want to know location, they want to see your signs, neighborhood impact, security, prohibit, this one's big with me, prohibiting sales to minors. In fact, whenever I draft ordinances, if you've gotten popped now 3 times for doing that, it's time to yank your license. Okay? 1 time I get it, 2 times I get it, 3, come on. Consumption, whether you want a consumption lounge or not, most municipalities don't want this. The bigger cities do. Jersey City, Hoboken, you know, they'd like to see consumption lounges. Traffic or parking issues. This one has always been high on my list. And I know that, you know, Fuquan had mentioned host community agreements, and we're going to spend some time on it. But, you know, there are going to be additional municipal incurred costs of enforcement. One of the things is, all right, we're supposed to have, the municipality gets 2%. Who's going to audit that? If the CFO is spending hours and hours, I don't want it on my shoulder, the taxpayer's shoulder. So maybe there should be something, as long as it's reasonably related to the money that's being spent by these borough employees, maybe that should be recaptured. But it's got to be reasonable. And maybe the first 2 days that they open up and there is 4 additional cops, well, the taxpayers should not be on the hook for this. The cannabis business should be. And, you know, cannabis business, you know, why? Other businesses don't do this. And my answer is, they're not like any other business. What other business has to pay a 2% VIG to the governing body in the municipality? It's just different. It's highly regulated at this point in time. Trash disposal. All right, so here we go. You see that my lab is not on here, and neither is delivery. 2% for the cultivator manufacturer. Well, why do you think that 1%? Fuquan, any thoughts as to why that is the outlier that deviated from the typical 2?
Yeah, someone said it and it was accepted. Like no one questioned why.
We always think our legislatures have these grandiose
Well,
plans.
so usually, like the consumption lounges came from a senator that has a lot of public housing in her district.
Makes
She said,
sense.
You can't smoke in the public housing.
Section
I
8.
want my constituents to be able to participate, so the consumption lounges thing got put in there. So most of the things I have a story. The 1%, I
Okay, all right, fair enough. The percentage is based on receipts of each sale. What else do we have here? This is a very complicated, what was going on here is I got hired by Reddington, and there is a cannabis business there that is a big cultivator, and they own 3 other dispensaries, and their argument was, well, the value of this transfer is 0, because the cultivator gives it to the dispensary because we own the dispensary. So their argument was, we don't have to pay the 2%. I got involved, and instead of a $50,000 check, I got them a $500,000 check. that is ludicrous. And our legislatures made sure that this wasn't gonna happen, and when I do ordinances for towns, I make sure that that the town spells out what that value should be. I tie it into what the third-party market rate is when that cultivator sells to a third-party dispensary versus the ones that they own. All right, so I hate this slide, but so many mayors and council folks ask me to do it, and I don't even, I mean, it's shooting from the hip. I probably spoke to 24 folks that operate businesses outside of New Jersey. And they said retail could be 9 million to 12 million gross per year. I have no idea. You guys probably have a better idea than I. No idea. 1,500. I don't think most folks even want this size for a retail, but 180 to 240K. Cultivation, 12 million to 15 million, and that's for about a 15K square foot. So that would be 240 to 300 per year. That's the problem here. You're not going to see dime one for 16 to 25 months. They need to ramp up. Manufacturing seems to be fairly lucrative, 20 million to 25. And again, these are, one councilman had asked me, but are these successful businesses or unsuccessful?
These are very
I would hope they're successful.
Thanks, I wish you were there to help me
They're
out. You know? I didn't want to be curt, but yeah,
They should have
so 400 to $500,000 per year. So what are some of the other potential benefits other than money? So local employment. Most towns do require that the cannabis business hire a certain percent of local residents. There's typically an increase in sales for local businesses, and here's where the wisecracks come in.
The
Pizzeria, right? Positive community impact. The cannabis businesses are required to show and make a positive community impact. Education, donations, expungement clinics, volunteerism, commercial vacancies. There certainly will be a significant decrease in commercial vacancies if your town opts in. And then, of course, the build-out will increase assessments. So this is for a municipal governing body, whether or not they decide to have a cannabis review board or somebody else decides the application, so we don't need to go through that. All right, so let's talk about host community. Host community. I actually did a presentation, and a descendant of this fellow was in the audience. He says, that's my great-grandfather, whatever the case may have been. Let's, all right, this is basically our appellate division saying they don't have a problem with host community agreements, but it can't be quid pro quo, and government officials are not supposed to solicit anything of value. We know that this is probably one of the worst statutes I've ever seen. It looks like our legislatures took the casino statute and just copied and pasted. So what does this mean?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's the casino statute and the ethics part of the casino statute applied to medical marijuana. And then when adult use happened, and they just plugged in adult use. So it's exactly the same statute.
And I can see why for casinos it makes sense. But let me give you an example, see if it makes sense here. So there could be, our Parsippany opted in, there could be a planner on the planning board, okay, whose wife wants to open a dispensary in, let's say, Asbury Park. It's not allowed to do it. And for some strange reason, the senators are exempt, lawyers are exempt.
That's a story offline.
I want to hear that one, because I heard that one too.
I got
They just, they
I wanna hear
can't,
that one.
you can't have an interest in a cannabis business anywhere in the state. I don't follow, I get it with a casino, because really there's only one place where the casinos are, but I don't get it as far as cannabis.
Well, the casinos is like the most restrictive in terms of ethics violations and rules. And when cannabis, you had a lot of naysayers. The thought was just make it as restrictive as anything we've ever done in order to get votes.
Yeah, I had to read it 6 times too. It's just so convoluted. So let's talk host community agreement. So again, it should be reasonable. Recoup the municipal cost. The CFO, if he's auditing, or if you need a third party to audit, doesn't really apply that much to retail, because don't the retail establishments have to file like an ST 750 with the state? They're not going to Mickey Mouse around with those numbers, but a cultivator doesn't have to file something like that. It's, the excise tax, the sales tax. You can put this in the host community agreement, employment opportunities. The applicant's gonna sponsor job hiring fairs. They're gonna attract local residents, women and people of color, reentry candidates, maybe local labor protection agreements. They're gonna engage in community outreach events to educate, perhaps provide matching funds for municipalities' drug and alcohol prevention, make contributions to local charities, first responders. Here's what it should not be. We'll give you the resolution of support, build us a new rec center, and 4 street sweepers. And it just can't be, give us this money and we'll act favorably on the, and you know, so some of the arguments against it is, well, wait a second, you know, a cannabis attorney like Quan years later may come in and say, wait a second, man, you know, we want to see in court, we don't want to, you know, we don't want to pay this stuff anymore, or tell us exactly where you're spending the money that we're giving you, like the $20,000 application fee. Where did that go? And not every business can afford a host community. You have micro, social equity applicants, and here's the worst one. You're asking applicants who were jailed by your town to now pay an additional benefit to the town. And we already went over the answer to that. Why should a cannabis business have to pay more than any other type of business? Because you ain't the same as any other type of business. There's nothing to prevent it. It could be implicitly authorized under the MLUL. Might be akin to a developer's agreement. It's an agreement. It's got to be signed by the mayor and the council folks. And some towns ask the successful applicant holder to defend and indemnify the town when the unsuccessful applicant sues them in court. This is really bad. You know, as a taxpayer, you know, let's say there's a town that only allowed 2 cannabis licenses and there were 4 applicants, and the 2 sue the other 2 and the town. The 2 that were successful and the 2 that were unsuccessful sue the 2 that were successful and the town. Now the town has to hire an attorney to defend the town. It makes no sense. The taxpayer should not have to shoulder that burden. Again, though, this is not for every cannabis business. It's probably for much bigger ones. Requires some site, you're gonna see this, that municipalities are gonna require some level of site control, even an LOI. I love this, but most municipalities won't do it. Change the ordinances to require notice to residents within 200 feet. If you're gonna make an application and you have to appear before some cannabis board, it really would be nice to tell your neighbors that you're moving in, you know, within 200 feet, so they get notice of what's going on and they can come to the meeting and ask some questions. But a lot of folks were opposed to this because this happens at the planning board, all right? So if you need a host community agreement, it goes into the ordinances. Let's see, that's about it. There is litigation here. I'm on top of about 10 to 12 cases right now. Citizens suing, claiming the town has no authority. That one already got dismissed, was appealed. There was a problem with the definition of school property. And again, most losing cannabis businesses are suing the town and the winning cannabis businesses. And be careful that the planning and zoning board members stating that we're not going to approve this because cannabis is illegal under federal law. That was a good one. That's just some differences. So thanks for your patience. I don't know, are there any questions? Or thanks for chiming in, guys. Appreciate it.
There's questions, yes.
I just had a question. What is the legal age where?
21.
21, okay. And so if someone goes into one of these facilities, is there a limit on to how much they can buy?
1 ounce.
Yes.
But they can come back every day for as long as they want.
Yeah.
It's
And they
1
do,
ounce.
if you do go to a dispensary, they do proof you. They do it like 3 times.
Yeah. Very
So, you know,
sophisticated, right?
They do it when you come in, they do it when you walk through the door where you purchase, they do it when you buy it. So they check your ID 3 times.
And the technology's really sophisticated.
Yeah.
I mean, my understanding is you can figure out if it's fake.
My question is, with the fact that we have open borders now, and the Chi-Coms are shipping fentanyl to the Mexican cartels, and they're sending it into the US, how do you know that you're not getting fentanyl or some
help
other
me out, man.
impurity?
Yeah, so that's why you want legal cannabis in the state, because first, the cannabis is grown legally, it's sold legally, has to be grown in the state. You can't transfer between borders, can't cross state lines, and it's gotta be tested by a lab, so that all that is tested before anyone can purchase it in a legal dispensary. Now, legacy dealers, which are the people that, are on the street, that's where the problem is coming. That's why you want cannabis to be legal, because it protects people from taking in the fentanyl and other things. That's the argument why you want it as
It's gotta be
opposed to
tested,
making it
it's
illegal.
compulsory.
And they're very, very strict, very, very strict.
And the testing labs are extremely sophisticated, upwards of $2 million of equipment. There's very little human hands. Everything is computerized and it gets sent to the CRC, so there's no fudging the data.
No.
What are the nearest towns that have facility?
So let's see, what's the nearest one from here?
Cassara may know that.
Montclair.
Montclair, yeah, Montclair's, that would be a 7.
Right.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
One of the other concerns I had is, I know this is a problem in apartment buildings where there's supposed to be no smoking. And my daughter lives in an apartment in New Jersey, and cannabis is coming to the
Yeah.
vents. And when she complains to the owner, they say there isn't anything they can do. But, this applies to cigarette smoke also.
Sure.
It just seems to me like it's an infringement on people's rights, that if you don't want to partake of it, you don't have it. And I know somebody that their wife was pregnant, they were living in an apartment, and their neighbor was smoking all the time. They were able to get out of their lease, but, that's one of the things. The other thing is,
Hold on, can't the
I
landlord
was
put that in the
gonna
lease
say,
and
the
say no more?
landlord, I
No.
think it says a landlord that has more than 4 units, he has the right to say you can't smoke.
So
Now,
it's
whether
up
he
to-
enforces it or
it's up
not,
to
they say they can't do
but
anything.
he said, well, he's wrong. Tell him to call me.
Tell him to call for
Hey, tell him to call me, he's absolutely.
Because he is, I do think so, the idea is that you should be able to partake of it in your own private residence, but obviously being considerate of your neighbors
But people aren't.
should be, and by the way, that's one of the reasons why I believe the consumption lounges are kind of being pushed forward. Like when you're going to a destination, we're talking about the cannabis, I don't know what you were saying, people coming from other places wanting to experience it. Where are you going to use cannabis if you're visiting from out of state? You're going to be smoking it outside. You can't be smoking it in your hotel room. So the idea of the consumption lounge is where it's isolated. You're right. So common decency is that you don't want to interrupt the good nature of your neighbor. You want to show concern for them. And cannabis, I don't think they'll ever change this, by the way, from Quan. I don't know why I'm saying this to you. I don't think they'll ever change the ability for it to smell the way it does. I think it always will have a scent to it because of the terpenes in the plant. But that is something that people do complain about, is the smell.
Synthetic, 5 years
Yeah, if
from
it's
now.
synthetic, then it probably won't be good. So.
One of the concerns I have is actually the name of the company, Happy Daze. Kind of, the first thing that strikes me is when you smoke it, you're gonna be in a daze. And my concern is people are driving under the influence, and I know that, with alcohol, they do the blood level test. But I have read something where most towns don't have the equipment to test for it. So one of my concerns is that people are going to be driving under the influence and maybe cause an accident. And the police don't really have any way to.
So let me just jump in. I don't know if you
Okay.
if you ever heard this it's somewhat
Go
a
ahead,
joke.
I knew
So-
you were going to.
Yeah, so, have you heard, the drunk guy, when he approaches a stop sign, he blows right through it.
Right.
The guy who's stoned approaches the stop sign and waits for it to turn green.
Yes.
So, they're much less dangerous when they combine the two. That's a problem.
Alcohol
From
in
my
control.
experience, I have seen that, that they don't drive as wild as someone who's drunk. But having said that, you're right. They don't have the equipment. They do have, it's in litigation right now that there are drug recognition experts that will be able to detect whether or not you're under the influence of cannabis or any other drug. But it stays in your system for days, as we know. There's no real good solution to your, or answer to your question right now.
So what happens to, I know that certain businesses do drug testing, so is now that going to rule out if you have marijuana in your system?
I can answer that.
Go.
Okay.
So I work in HR
Uh-huh.
for an elevator escalator corporation, and we are no employee, whether you work on an elevator shaft or not, no employee in my company, no matter where you live, can have cannabis in your blood. And we do random testing. If you're in an accident, you're tested automatically. We do pre-hire drug screens. So corporations, and that's a safety issue. Like
Right.
if a person building an elevator in a building is in danger of, their life because of something that may be in their blood, everybody in the company has to participate in that restriction, to be fair to that mechanic. So my company has, like Colorado, I think was the first place to legalize where we had employees, and it didn't matter. There's no, like the state law that allows consumption does not apply to our law, and the union also.
And some
For-
police
for
office, police departments all over the state, some have said yes for their officers, some have said
Yeah,
no.
it's by
It's by business, it's
by
by
business.
industry.
Sure.
And
Yep.
I think that if it's a safety concern,
Yep.
a company would have the right to do that. If it's not a safety concern, they may be violating some civil rights.
We'll see some lawsuits.
We'll see, there's gonna be, but
Trying to figure
your
it out.
point about drug testing is definitely one that's.
Yeah, I had, myself, I had taken a bagel with poppy seeds in it, and they caught me in
Yep.
the company
With poppy seeds.
saying that
Yeah,
I
it
was
shows
on
up
drugs.
as
I
drugs.
didn't
Really?
realize that poppy seeds would do that.
It
Yeah,
shows
they
up.
I didn't know that
Yeah,
either.
yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah,
got
they
jars
do.
of them at home.
Poppy seeds?
Poppy seeds, believe it or
This young
not.
man had a
Yeah, the
question.
young man behind,
How do they determine, the difference between CBD and, pot?
who determines?
Companies that drug test.
Well, they're testing for THC. So
But-
THC is different than CBD.
0.03%.
Right, so if it's
Yeah.
over that, then it's considered.
So it's a THC that they're
It's
testing
still in your
for.
blood though.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
So,
How
and
do
it's
they
in your blood for a
determine
long
the
time.
difference between
So-
CBD and CBD
don't.
use?
They're not gonna
and-
test it for
don't.
CBD, they're
That's-
testing for THC.
Yeah, they're
Testing
they're
for
testing for
THC.
THC, and if the
Testing for
THC level is over.
But what he's saying is
whatever it
there's some residual THC.
There's some residual,
CBD.
but
Right.
it shouldn't be.
Well, it shouldn't be that
shouldn't be
high to test too high.
But if it stays in your system for a month at least, CBD, and they sell it at Marshalls and Home Goods, it's like, you can't get away from it.
No, you can't.
You shouldn't be testing
They
positive.
put
for
it in food, they
THC
put it
if
No,
you
in
not-
had
not
drinks.
with
If
they-
you had
CBD.
CBD, you
They're
should be
testing for
testing.
THC, not CBD. They're testing for, it's a different cannabinoid.
They should have home tests so you can test it out to make sure you're good.
There are
So-
home tests.
Their home tests?
So I,
Yeah.
can I just say something, because I kind of feel the group for a minute. So I respect everyone's opinion on cannabis, because I do think that this is a transition. We're going through a historical transition where something that was illegal for decades is now being made legal. And I start off by saying this, I sound like a philosopher, but it's true. Your presuppositions determine how you see reality. So if you already presuppose that cannabis is a gateway drug to heroin, there's nothing that I'm going to be able to say to you to convince you that it's good for your community or the country or anything else. But I would say to you that you've got to look at both sides of it. I did. I looked at both sides of it. I did my own independent research, and there is more good that's done by cannabis than evil. You are right. You're still going to have the issues of driving under the influence. I think that if people are stoned, they shouldn't be driving, and if they're caught driving and they're stoned, they should be incarcerated. I think that they shouldn't be selling it to minors. I think there's still a lot of debate as to how it affects someone under a certain age. I think that people need to be educated on both the benefits and the detriments of the drug. It is a medicine. It is not, although I will tell you, and I'll stand here and I'll say it all day long, that cannabis is 100 times better than alcohol. And we have no problem with alcohol at all. And people consume it without any problems. And if anything should be under prohibition in my mind, it should be alcohol. But I'm just showing now my beliefs.
I don't
So,
want to get philosophical.
but I-
God's killing me right here. But with the driving, you're not supposed to drive impaired. And when we were debating this, this was one of the big issues. The driving, the children, those were the two big things. Now, when we were deciding this thing, there were a list of drugs that if you are on will make you drive erratically, that are illegal. There are a list of drugs that are legal that if you are on, that will make you drive erratically. Added to that side of legal, a crime baby, they kept you up all night, less than 3 hours sleep. Like all these things will make you dangerous on the road, right? You remember some years ago, Tiger Woods got pulled over and they had the tape of him and the cop said, touch your nose, and he did like this, no, your nose, not my nose. And he was obviously impaired. I thought he was drunk, but he was on some medication, right? And I was thinking to myself, what does it matter? If I'm on the road with him, I'll be just as dead. Yeah. I don't care if it was legal, illegal, if you didn't sleep, if the baby's crying. I want the cop to pull you over and check you out and see if you're impaired. And that hasn't changed. It didn't change with the legalization of marijuana. You still can't drive.
And the law doesn't define what it is. It just says driving under the influence or driving while impaired. Right. It doesn't say, it's not a different law if you're driving under the influence of alcohol or, too much sugar.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I don't think it's any more dangerous than it was last week. This young man.
I didn't want to bring the first one to bring up alcohol and cannabis because I think we're in two totally separate realities here. But I will say, my brother is a police officer in Longville Township, which is southern part of Morris County. And I say to him often, he's been on probably 18 years at this point, I said, how many house calls have you made because of somebody, in a domestic dispute because of alcohol? So, loads. And I was with him last week at his kid's communion. Let me catch up with you. How many times have you been to a house call, a domestic dispute because somebody has been using marijuana? 18 years, none. Like not one. So I like to separate the two. I just want to.
It's a philosophical statement more than anything else, because I think people don't understand.
Yeah,
there is a certain amount of hypocrisy in the way we see things, because our presupposition determines the way we see reality. I grew up with alcohol. I was 10 years old, and my parents said, you need to try some wine, because we want you to test it out before you go out and get drunk when you're 11. So I did some wine, and I was the kid who basically waited.
That explains it.
That explained a lot. I was the kid whose mother drank every night, okay, Seagram 7, and then she elevated to Crown Royal. I was the kid who every day took up just a little bit of Crown Royal and put it in my canteen so that by Saturday I had a full canteen. So you can't tell me that alcohol doesn't have an effect on people's lives. But I know that you can say the same thing about cannabis, but cannabis is a Schedule I narcotic, no benefit whatsoever according to the federal government. Up there with heroin and LSD. You can't tell me that that's just stupid. I'm sorry.
That was Nixon.
It's still there, and they've talked about it many times. We know it's politics. And then also the federal government has the patent. I mean, come on, guys. Let's read between the lines. At least let's be honest about it. I agree with you that we need to set certain guardrails so that our kids don't get stoned all the time. And there's addictive behaviors. There are people who will be smoking pot 24/7. It's just like, it's alcohol. It's like anything else. People need to be educated. We need to train people on this medicine. By the way, my friends, people who do cannabis, do they go out and say they're going out to get stoned? What do they say they're going to do? They're going out to medicate. So
Mine say they're going to get stoned.
yeah, that's it's a medicine. It's something that should be used with wisely and with a certain amount of caution. That's my opinion, but I'm a hippie.
All right, any other questions?
I have a question.
Almost 8:30, yeah.
I have a question. So you talked a couple times about how people who are not successful to gain a license sue those who did receive a license. What are they suing for? I don't understand that part.
You picked
Sour grapes.
Picked your husband instead of me.
Sour grapes.
Basically,
That's it.
they're saying
sour
that
grapes. Thank you.
it's unfair. They picked them for a reason.
And are they winning?
Sometimes.
Some will.
Really?
There was a case where the judge vacated the other two resolutions of support. But for the most part, the judges are coming down and giving wide discretion to those who are deciding that it should be Todd and Ron over Ron.
This is where we're supposed to sing a song. We said we were gonna sing a song at the end to bring it all together.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to focus on the positive side for a moment here. My daughter,
Here, I'll give you the mic.
oh, I have my own, I just never used it. I'm a teacher and I've never used the microphone.
You walked in here with that?
Is it?
I'm taking it away from her.
I'm telling you, this is it. This is how you do it. Okay, so I just wanted to focus a little bit on the positive. I'm the caregiver and legal guardian for my daughter. At 21 years of age, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It came upon her very hard, very many symptoms all at once, visual problems, walking problems, balance issues, and throughout this she had chronic pain at a very young age. So doctors had given her just a gamut of various medications, all of which had terrible side effects. The main one that I never understood was the fatigue, because fatigue is already a symptom of MS, and it was just putting her in an awful state. So we decided to try the marijuana. I became her caregiver, like in New Jersey, a caregiver is a person who has to buy and transport the marijuana for the person who is ill if they're unable to go to a dispensary themselves. And in her case, she was unable to drive. And it was life-changing for her. She began doing things that she was unable to do before, having a lot of strength in her body, exercising, walking, seeing much better than before. She used to have double vision. And I, through this journey, have seen a lot of people who are very seriously ill who have benefited through marijuana. And I'm talking in terms of the medical marijuana, but if marijuana that she finds helpful was available in Parsippany, that would just be awesome.
That's well put, and you are to be commended for caring for your daughter, and your story is a reason why I am an evangelist for cannabis. Your story is what keeps me going, telling people they need to at least consider it.
And also a lot of the people are in my age group who are helping or taking care of spouses or older
Or
children.
parents.
She's now 34, and it's hard sometimes because you have to drive all over to find the exact product that helps that person. The supply is not always there. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, question.
Do you have a question?
Oh,
Yeah.
press the button,
So-
now I got it.
So, yeah, hold it down. You're good now.
So I'm all for having you guys in town. Just out of curiosity, like what kind of comments do you guys get when the town kind of hears you guys are interested in opening Happy Daze?
I mean, generally, it's been super positive. I know the council themselves are pretty divided on the issue. But really, when we tell our friends, we tell our family, we even talk about it with strangers who are curious about it and they know what we're trying to do, it's generally been very positive. And they ask questions because they feel comfortable asking us. They don't feel like they're being judged. And I think that's half the problem, is that there are a lot of people out there that do consume or are very curious or are interested in using it for themselves, but they're not comfortable asking questions because they're going to be judged right off the bat. So generally when they find out that we're doing this, they ask, and we try to give them the best answers that we can and help guide them on their journey to get what they need and explain what would be useful for them.
Awesome, you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
All right, well, thanks very much for having us.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.